we're going to start with our ice cream because we need that to chill and we need it to freeze. IQF raspberries are individually quick frozen. Okay, so the nice thing about IQF is that what they do is they harvest the fruit at the peak of ripeness and then they lay it out and freeze it very quickly so that the ice crystals go in there and gives you a nice product. So if you don't need to worry about the shape, so these berries as they thaw will become very mushy. Okay, for us, that's perfect. For if you wanted this to be on a fresh fruit tart, you would not want to use it or garnish on a plate. You would not want to use IQF raspberries. But if you're putting it in something, it's cheaper, has good flavor, and it's a great way to use it, okay? All right, so they're still a little frozen. So what I'm going to have you guys do is we need these to set for 2 hours. So we're going to microwave them. While we're working on that, for my ice cream, I'm going to put my sugar, my 187 sugar, and my egg yolks into a bowl. And then we're going to whisk those together, and we're going to take our milk and we're going to put it in our pot. So we're just going to mix them with the sugar and the raspberries. Make sure your name's on the container. And kind of press them with a spoon because we want to break these up. We don't want them to be whole raspberries. Okay, so the reason for the sugar. So raspberries, fruit, naturally have water in them, okay? Water freezes, it's hard, right? Sugar doesn't freeze, right? Sugar and alcohol will affect ice cream from freezing. So the reason why we macerate our fresh fruit and sugar is to kind of balance. The sugar will go into the fruit and the water, it'll kind of balance out a little bit so that when you add it to your raspberry ice, your vanilla ice cream, so we're just going to swirl this in. When we add it in there, what's going to happen is it's not going to freeze on us. So you won't be hitting ice chunks of raspberry. It'll be still, you can get your spoon through it. Yes, sir.
That's the second part of the sugar.
Yes, this is the 62 grams of sugar with the 250 grams of raspberry IQF. All right, so once when you get them mixed well, just put your name on it, and this needs to go in the refrigerator for 2 hours. All right, so this is why we need to do this first. You got microwaves in both kitchens, so make sure you utilize both of them, okay? Milk, sugar, and yolks. I'm going to scald my milk. I'm going to whisk together my sugar and my yolks. Now we reduced our amount of fat because we're going to be adding the sugar and the raspberries to this ice cream. So we altered the recipe slightly. Most of your recipes have that altered slightly, so make sure you pay attention and read the directions. So because we have so much sugar and so little yolks, it's kind of dry. Ideally, what we would do is we would make this ice cream base and then let it refrigerate for a day before we actually put it in the ice cream machine. It helps the fat and the milk, the cream, and the egg yolks kind of settle in, and it really helps the flavor to come out. We just don't have the time for that all the time. All right, so as soon as your milk comes to a boil, all right, scald it, see the bubbles, turn it off, grab your pot from underneath, slowly add the hot milk to your egg yolk and sugar mixture. So this is a lot like creme anglaise, okay guys? So now I got a little bit of milk so I can kind of really break up these egg yolks and sugar. So break it up, whisk it up, slowly add the hot milk. Wet towel to keep your bowl from moving. Just like an inch of water, bring it to a boil to make a double boiler. Remember, we don't want the water to touch the bowl. We just want the steam to. Okay, so today we're going to make ice cream. We're going to make a raspberry mousse. So Actually, a lot of you guys missed last week. So last week we made these little Bavarian guys as an example of a molded dessert with the mirror glaze. And inside, you can see we have Bavarian and cake and then glaze on the outside, okay? So this is an example of what you can do for your final, all right? So that's something else we need to talk about today before you leave is I need you guys to start sending me pictures of what you're gonna do for your final. All right, water's to boil. Turn it down to about 8. What we're looking for the temperature of the water is we want steam to still be produced, but not so much steam that it's rattling our bowl or so much steam coming out that we're going to burn ourselves. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. We're going to cook this over double boil until it reaches about 175 degrees Fahrenheit. So you will need your thermometers. I'm not going to pull them out. They're in the cage with a green lid. I'll know I'm getting close to when most of this bubbles, when most of these bubbles go down. They won't be completely gone, but as long as I'm using a rubber spatula or a wood spoon, they'll be pretty much decreased significantly. So 175, because 1, we want to make sure we cook our egg yolks so that we don't get sick. And 2, we want it to start to thicken, okay? So that's why we go to 175. A lot of recipes will tell you 183, but I find that if you get too far, it'll start to curdle. And so if, I like going a little bit lower than what will be the curdling temperature, okay? All right, so this actually says 180 over. Go ahead and take it off. Double check my temperature. And I am there. So make sure you wash your thermometer. We're going to strain the creme anglaise. Always scrape your containers and your bowls when you're cooking. Remember, we measure to the gram. We want to use it to the gram. You can use the same spatula. And then we're going to add our smidge of salt because we're not doing a pinch. So a smidge, our vanilla, and our cold cream. This way it'll start to get it chilled. So we want to make sure this is cold before we go into the ice cream machine, which won't take very long, and we're going to group every base together. So I'm going to grate everybody's base before it goes into the machine, because the machine can't hold, it cannot freeze small amounts. It has to do larger. For simple syrup, you can actually just measure volume. So sugar, 1 cup, 8-ounce cup of water. And then I want you to just take one of these purple scoops, which I was supposed to wear gloves, so I'm going to wash this before I put it back. We're just going to bring this to a boil. So we're just dissolving the sugar and the jam together. So simple syrup is simply water and sugar. Dessert syrup is the simple syrup with the flavor, okay? We are using raspberry jam because we are going to be making a raspberry mousse to go in our layers. So it complements the flavor. It doesn't have to be the same flavor, but it should complement, and it should have flavor, okay? You can use jams, you can use alcohols, you can spices and herbs, and you can also use zest, like I'm planting orange. If you want an orange or lemon or lime or grapefruit, okay? So just simply bring that to a boil, put it on your hot pad, and just leave it on your table. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we are going to trim our cake. So when our mousse is ready, we can put it right together. Hold your plastic wrap so you can still use it, okay? Because we're going to need to wrap our cake up while we're making our mousse, so you can keep that. If you look at your chocolate cake, it should have a little bit of curve to the top, okay? So what we're going to do, first I want you to release it from the cardboard. So I'm really just trying to get the knife in between the cake and the cardboard just to release it. I'm not really trying to cut it. I'm just getting it to not stick. All right? And then we're going to keep that cardboard on. Okay? I just want it to be movable. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to trim off just the top of my cake so it's flat. Alright, so go down as far as you need to make sure it's flat, but don't go any further. Okay, so if you got a dome or if you have a little bit of a dip, I actually have a slight dip in the middle of mine. So I'm going to go down just enough so that I can get that dip so it's nice and level. Make sure to keep your serrated knife parallel with the table at all times. Have your hand on top of the cake and you're just going to slowly spin it around. Go very slowly, spiraling in. I pulled them out first thing when I got here, so they should be thawed, but just in case. Alright, so this piece of parchment is for scraps to just make it a little bit easier for cleaning up. So when you're done, this should be a nice level cake. Okay? We need to have 3 layers of cake. And everybody's cake might have risen slightly different. They should be pretty close to the same size, but they might be slightly different. So what I want you to do is you're going to take what's up on the side and you're going to score to make sure that you have 3 equal layers. Okay? And then you're going to put this on the cardboard. You're going to take that score mark and you're going to keep the blade parallel with the table, hand on top of the cake, and you're going to slowly spiral this into the center, okay? I do not want your hand over here because if by chance the knife slips, it'll cut you. I prefer that to not happen. So that's why our hand is on top of our cake. It's a little bit safer. Plus you're keeping the cake steady, okay? So keeping the blade parallel with the table, spiraling in slowly, and then once we get that third off, then the rest should be in half. And it's much easier to see the thickness of the cake if you lower your eyes to the cake. Don't stand up here and go like this, okay? I want your eyes to be down with the layer of the cake, at least when you're starting. And then as you get in, you can bring it up a little bit. Alright, so when you cut those, I've given all of you guys a ring mold. So what you want to do is put your cakes on top of each other. Put this on top of the parchment. Make sure they're stacked even. Put the ring mold on top. And you're going to take the blade straight up and down. And you're going to make the cake the same size as the ring mold. So cut just a little bit at a time. When you start to get a lot of the way around the cake, the ring mold, you're going to get to the point where you're going to need to start holding the ring mold. Because it will start to move on you. Okay? All of this is extra crumbs. This is going to go on our plastic wrap. This you can either take home or throw away, but regardless, you're getting it off your table. And then you're going to re-wrap your cake to keep it from drying out. Okay, cut cake, unwrapped cake is cake that's going stale. Nobody likes stale cake. All right, so make sure you keep that covered. You should have cut a piece of acetate. If you haven't, then just do it before you go back. You have 2 rolls over there. Make sure it will overlap by about 1 inch or 2 inside the ring mold. Okay? You just measure it outside, it's not that much of a difference. But we're going to put it inside the ring mold when we start assembling. Alright, so you're done with your knife. Alright, so now we're going to go into the raspberry mousse. Okay? So first thing everybody should have already done is you should have already submerged your gelatin sheets in the ice water, making sure you put 1 in at a time. And then it's like pasta. After you put it in, after about 5 minutes, go back and make sure all the points and corners and edges are down in the ice water, completely submerged, okay? Very important that the gelatin sheet is in ice water, not just lukewarm water. The gelatin will start to dissolve. Has to be ice water, okay? So if you don't see ice floating, you need more, all right? Okay, so those need to soak for about 15 15 minutes to get properly hydrated. If we were using powdered gelatin, we would actually have to measure our ice water and then sprinkle the gelatin on the top. So if you're getting gelatin from Kroger and you want to practice this at home, you just measure out that much water. So 10 times the weight of the gelatin. So we needed, well, I told you guys 4 each. So they're about 3 grams each. So it's 12 grams. So you would do times 10, so 120 grams of water, cold, and then sprinkle 12 grams of gelatin on top of it, and it'll absorb all that water. Gelatin sheets will naturally absorb what it needs to be hydrated. So that's why you have so much, but if you don't have it in ice water, it'll dissolve into it. You'll lose some of your proteins from it. Okay? Just when they're hydrated, they stop. They don't get over full like pasta. When you keep pasta in water, it won't keep absorbing moisture. It'll just stop right when it has what it needs. And for pastry chefs, it's much easier to measure out this way. This way, like mine and Chef Pyramids are both in here, and so we can just keep working. Okay. So we're going to make an Italian meringue. An Italian meringue has cooked sugar and water to 240. Really good numbers. I always have to 243. So we're going to cook our sugar water to 243. We want to make sure there's no crystals in there. So I actually have some sugar up on the side of my pot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a clean pastry brush and some clean water. And so what I need to do when I'm making Italian meringue is I have to cook my sugar to 243 and get my egg whites to soft peaks at the same time. If my egg whites get to soft peaks early, I just turn it down low, not a big deal. But if my sugar is there too fast, so then that's a problem because then we have to wait and you get carryover heat and it goes too far. You start to get caramel at 300, 320 degrees, so it's not too far to go from 243 to 320. So I always like to make sure I start my egg whites first, and I can always slow them down, okay? Make sure soft peaks. So once when the whip's going around and it starts to, the egg whites bubble up and they're staying up, when the whisk goes through, then you're probably there. You should turn your machine down to like 4, okay? So before I turn on the machine, so what I'm gonna do, since I have, can you see these crystals on the side of my pot? So what I'm going to do is sugar will get to 243 when it has a proper balance of sugar and water, okay? It'll just naturally, the temperature tells you how much moisture is in the sugar, basically. So I could add this whole cup of water and it'll eventually get to 243 and it'll be the same product when you guys use it. The only difference is it's going to take longer to get there, okay? So, but what I want to do, because I have sugar on the side, I actually have some over here too, is I'm going to be generous with my water, and I'm going to let it wash down the sides of my pot. If I have sugar crystals, it only takes one, and it's a chain reaction that goes throughout my pot. If I pour it into my egg whites, what's going to happen is I'm going to have gritty Italian meringue, all right? And we don't want that, so that means gritty mousse, all right? So you got to stop it at the source. Different meringues. So we made meringue pie, correct? So that was a common meringue where we just took sugar and added it straight to egg whites. There is a Swiss meringue where you would take the sugar, add it to the egg whites, and warm it up over a double boiler. Okay, that's a Swiss meringue. This is an Italian meringue. So Italian meringue always has cooked sugar and water added to your egg whites. This is the most stable meringue because we are cooking our sugar at such a high temperature. It actually cooks our egg whites a little bit, makes it a little bit more stable. You can technically freeze Italian meringue and then pull it back out and thaw it. You cannot really do that with the other ones. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to turn this on high. Turn my sugar water on high. You gotta make sure you start with cleaning everything. Egg whites will not whip. There's a sign of any fat inside of the bowl or of the whip. Your sugar will crystallize if it has dirt in there. So you gotta make sure egg whites are already at top heat, so I'm gonna turn those down to like 4. My sugar, I'm just gonna simply swirl it around. So it's dissolved. And then I'm gonna brush the sides down to make sure I don't have any crystals from the swirling. And then it shouldn't take too long. Remember to accurately measure the temperature of the sugar. Your thermometer needs to be submerged to where it bends out, right? So now, because it's such a small amount, which is why we're using our small pot, I'm gonna tilt this up and double check my temperature so I get a more accurate read. And it's only 225. Make sure you keep the pot in the middle of your cook tech. You have those circles to help you know where the center is. Alright, so I'm at 244, which is just a degree higher than I want. So my egg whites I want to have on 6. And then what you want to do is be careful. You do not want the sugar to hit the wick. Alright? So I'm going to slowly add the sugar down the side of the bowl. I'd rather have one little stream of sugar stuck to the side of my bowl. If I hit the whip, I'm going to have a bunch of beads along the sides. And I don't want those beads. So I have a nice little steady stream. I'm going to add half of my sugar. I'm going to stop. I'm going to lift up my bowl because the hot sugar is just going to the bottom of the bowl. So I'm going to lift it up, make sure I'm getting all that hot sugar. And then I'm going to continue in the same spot so I only have hot sugar on one part of my mixing bowl. So add all your sugar. You do not scrape the pot, okay? Just what falls out, falls out. Lift up the bowl one more time. And then we need this to whip until it's cool, all right? And I'm going to keep it on 6. We don't need to turn it back up. All right. While that's happening, I'm going to put water in my sugar pot. I'm going to get my cream out of the refrigerator and I'm going to whip it up to soft peaks. Remember, whenever we're whipping, we need to make sure our cream is in the refrigerator so the fat's cold, so when we add air, it'll hold it. All right, so we're going to whisk this. Remember, I pulled up my bowl. I used a large whisk, okay, holding it on the handle. And I'm doing kind of an oval so that I get air in there. If I do this, I'm not getting air in there, and I'm just scraping the bottom of my bowl, get a great spot, which I don't want. So it's not that it doesn't touch the bowl, it just slightly touches it. It's only on the side, I'm not jamming the whisk into the bottom of the bowl. There we go. So you got my little soft peak. I'm going to go just a little bit more. All right. This is close, but it's not quite there. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I am going to take a medium-sized bowl. All right, because we're going to do more than just dissolve gelatin in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 pieces of gelatin sheets. The chef pyramids right here. Squeeze out the excess water, okay? We're going to put this on top of the hot water, okay? So that's why we have it that way. All right, while those are working, I'm going to fold my raspberry puree into my whipped cream. So you always go thin into thick, and you always go slowly, and you always use a rubber spatula, okay? Lots of always. So I'm adding just a little bit at a time and folding it in so that my raspberry puree is evenly distributed, and before it all gets absorbed, I'm adding more, okay? So because I'm not cooking my raspberry puree, I have this nice bright color. If I was to cook it, then it'd be kind of grayish and not as pleasant. feels like so you know when you can take it off. It was slightly warmer before, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my meringue, and this is why I kind of kept my whip around, is my whipped cream is kind of fluid, and my meringue's kind of firmer. So I'm going to see how they go. I'm going to fold a little bit at a time. So mousse should be nice, light, and airy. So I'm going to add the rest of this. I'm going to have cooked sugar in my bowl. It's just going to happen, okay? So try not to scrape out the cooked sugar. Try to only get the meringue. And then the only way to get this cooked sugar out is hot water. The hot water can be the water you're using from your pot, okay? If you need to, you can run it under hot water at my sink, but I do not want to see a bunch of bowls sitting back here, right? All right, so we're just going to fold this together. So I can fold this together. If it's mostly together and I still have some meringue lumps, I can hit it with my whisk. That's why I kept it on my table. So remember, folding is going down one side of the bowl through the center and then let the product fall on top of itself. Okay, so my gelatin is warmed up, so it's nice and fluid now. Alright, and all I did is I brought the water to boil, I turned it off, and I put the gelatin on there. Okay? The water was not on once the gelatin was on. If the gelatin gets too hot, the proteins in the gelatin start to break down and they don't work as well. Okay? So it's important to make sure that you do not overheat your gelatin. Once my gelatin's dissolved, I'm going to take a small bit of my mousse, and this is called tempering. So you guys are used to doing it with eggs and hot milk, right? Well, now we're tempering gelatin into something cold. We did this last week with Marion. So we're doing it again. The chef that did this recipe does it slightly different. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a small amount. We're going to warm up the gelatin and the mousse to 100 degrees, and it's already there. We're going to take it off the heat, and then we're going to fold it in. And you need to go kind of quickly, all right? So a little bit at a time, so you don't want to heat it up and pour it in one spot. See the color difference because it warmed up a little bit, that raspberry. So the reason we want it to be 100 degrees is because if it's too cold, right now I'd be getting gelatin lumps in my mousse, okay? If it's too hot, I'd be destroying my whole batch of mousse. So it's very important to pay attention to temperatures. So once it's all together, make sure you have gloves on whenever you're touching your cake. All right, this is not COVID, this is Board of Health. Whenever you are touching something that is no longer going to be baked, you should have gloves on or cooked. Okay, so what we're going to do next, you guys are going to use your scales. You're going to put the ring mold and the acetate, all right, together. I'm going to zero, actually, I'm going to take one layer of cake, put it in the bottom. I'm going to take my dessert syrup, and I'm going to generously moisten my cake. So I chose this cake because it holds up really well. One, it was a mixing method I needed, but two, because it holds up well when you freeze it and then thaw it and try to work with it. So I specifically chose this cake just for you. All right, so I'm going to zero it out now. All right, and technically you can do this on the table, but so I'm going to zero it out, and I'm going to add about half of my mousse. So I want you guys to do 300 grams of mousse, And then I want you to take your bowl scraper to the plastic one, and I want you to spread that slightly. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? Just get it around. And then I want you to take another layer of cake, put it on top, and then you're gonna press it down, and then make sure it's level, okay? So when you're pressing it, you're making sure that you're getting rid of air bubbles and all your mousse is leveling out in there, okay? Okay, so once when that's level, you're gonna dessert syrup again. And this time, I want you to dessert syrup both of the layers that are left. Alright, zero it out. And then another 300 grams of mousse. This way, you know that your layers are even, okay? Unlike when we did the mousse in the ring mold, and we kind of guesstimated, some of you guys were kind of off. So I don't want to be off this time. So we're going to press that out. And look, it's coming up over. This would be such a good cake. I'm going to make it, this is dessert syrup side. I'm going to flip it over so non-dessert syrup side is up. And then I'm going to layer, press this gently because it's right above my acetate, or right, my mousse is right at my acetate. So press slightly. Alright, so we're gonna make the ganache, which we've made before. We're just making a larger quantity. So just simply bring it to a boil, the heavy cream, the heavy cream, the sugar, and the glucose all together. So this is ganache icing. It's got a little bit of sugar in there and glucose, which will help make it shinier, make it look prettier with being the outside of the cake. So this is the medium pot, not the small one, not the medium. Definitely do not use the small pot, but anything larger is okay. All right, comes to boil, turns it off. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unmold my cake. And I'm going to slide it onto my rack that I have. Aiden passes up. So I'm going to move this using my ring mold to help me. Be careful because my top layer of cake, and I know some of you guys have the same thing, did not quite go into my ring mold. So I'm being careful that I push that in there. So if you just put your cake in the freezer, you have to wait at least a half hour to do this, okay? Mine's probably been in there an hour. And then you're going to find where the acetate overlapped. You're going to peel that off. Your glaze, and you're just going to stir it. Notice I'm using a rubber spatula. I'm not using a whisk because I want to keep the amount of air bubbles low. If it wasn't going to be on the outside, then yes, we could use a whisk. And it would come together faster, but you're going to add air. But so far, every time I've been teaching you how to use this icing, it's been outside and decorative. So we don't want air bubbles. So I'm going to put my rack up, and I'm going to, I'm going to just pour this from the center, and I'm going to have this go down the sides. Okay. And tap it slightly to level it off. We don't want a big mound of ganache in the middle of our cake. I'm going to take this off. I'm going to take my ganache, put it back in my bowl. I'm going to put this back on the sheet pan, and I'm going to put it back in the flash chiller. Okay? We should be able to fit everybody in there. All right? Any questions? And I'm just going to let this set up. We're going to keep this ganache, and hopefully I have time. We're going to whip it, and we're going to finish it. I don't want you to go anywhere, so hold on. We're making ice cream, all right? And the ice cream, what we're doing is we are churning it. So it's a churned frozen ice cream. When we churn it, we're adding air, okay? So there's ice cream, there's gelato. Gelato is basically the Italian version of American ice cream. except for it's got less fat. Okay, so it'll crystallize a little bit faster. So in Italy, when they're making their gelato, they freeze it. They do what we're doing right now. They churn it every day before they serve it. That's why it's so nice and light and airy. So this is churned frozen. There's also, and it's got a custard base. Okay. There's also a Philadelphia style, which is kind of more the whippy dip that you get from like Dairy Queen, where it's just flavored milk. Okay, it's not a custard base. So that is called Philadelphia style. Okay, so that's not eggs. Graters and probably aguanices is more of a custard base. Okay, so it's got the eggs in there. Then there is sorbet and gelato, or sorbet and sherbet. Okay, sherbet will usually have some sort of a dairy product in there. Does not always have to, but it could. So sherbet is more American. Sorbet is more French. Okay, so sorbet is and sherbet both are fruit based. Sometimes sherbet will have a little bit of egg whites and some milk, possibly, not always. Sherbet might have some egg whites, not milk. Okay, so they're similar but slightly different. So sherbet is American, sorbet is French, and so they are both churned in a machine like we're doing our ice cream today. The other one, the Italian version, would be granite. So granite would be taking the ice mixture of water and sugar mixture that's flavored. You would put it in a pan, and every half hour you would take a fork and you would go and you would move it. And it's kind of like making it, the texture will remind you like a snow cone. Okay, so it's going to have bigger ice crystals because it's not constantly moved. All right? So those are the different types of ice cream sorbet granite. All right? You could, if you don't have a freezer and you wanted ice cream, you could make a mousse and then freeze it, and then it kind of be similar to ice cream. So like what we made today, we froze it up, we call it frozen mousse, and so then you would have, it's more kind of an ice cream-ish without having the ice cream. I also, like, when I was working at DB's, I would often do a panna cotta, which is it's a custard, but it's only milk. It's a flavored sweetened milk thickened with gelatin, but it would kind of give you more the texture of an ice cream without having an ice cream machine. And you can flavor it different ways. Overrun. So overrun is the amount of air that you add to your ice cream. Okay? So you can have almost zero overrun, or you can have 100% overrun. Okay? The zero overrun is going to be really hard and thick. 100% is going to be really light and airy. Okay? Really need to have some air in there for it to not crystallize. If you just made this ice cream base and put it in a container and then in the freezer, it's going to have ice crystals in it. So by adding air, overrun, we're not going to have those ice crystals. All right. If you decide, I'm going to change up the recipe a little bit, so you have to be careful because alcohol and sugar will keep your product from freezing. So you can't say have a raspberry sorbet and then just decide, you know what, I'm going to add some Chambord to this. This is going to be really good. So Chambord's like a raspberry flavored or dark cherry flavored liqueur. So if you add that to it, it's going to keep it from freezing. So you have to be careful. You want to reduce some of your sugar so that you can add some of the flavoring of the liqueur. So you have to be careful. You can't just say, oh, instead of making this raspberry mix, I'm just going to make vanilla ice cream and then put jam in there. Jam has a lot of sugar. So you have to be careful when you're working with sugar and liquors, what things are going to be frozen. It will affect how they freeze. Okay? All right, so I'm going to finish this. I'm going to show you how to do it so that everybody knows how when we pull it out. So the first batch is ready, which was the perfect amount that people for me to stop at because it's all the way full. All right, so the overrun, you can measure that by how many quarts go in and how many quarts come out. So it's a volume measurement. So we should have 30% more ice cream volume-wise than what we put in. Okay. All right, so because we're doing raspberry swirl, So the way this machine works, this is the freezer, okay? This dial with the snowflake on it. And it actually turned off, so it's been running without freezing for a little bit, okay? Which is good, because this machine is so strong and powerful. If I just turn off my machine so it's no longer spinning, without keeping my freezer, getting that turned off first, my paddles would freeze to the side. To empty out ice cream, you just simply turn it to the chute will, it'll come out the chute, so it reverses the way that the blade is moving. So now it's going to push it out of the chute versus keeping it in. So I'm just going to simply open this up. I'm going to fill 1 quart. Shortly before it gets there, I'm going to shut the chute. So it kind of looks like soft serve right now, right? I'm going to take it, and the rest is going to be in the monitor so you guys can back up. So I'm going to put it in a bowl. Before you guys actually do this, I want you to write your name on it, because you're going to use it again later. So you're going to take your raspberries, which have been set for more than 2 hours. We're going to just simply add all of the raspberry to it. We're going to slightly mix it in. This should not be total pink, okay? And then we're going to go back into our container. And because remember we let the raspberries sit in the sugar, raspberries are not going to be frozen solid on this. We're going to pull the cake out of the freezer, and what we're looking for is just for the ganache to be set. And then you're going to use your offset spatula. You're going to get a clean board, okay? Use your offset spatula to get underneath that cake. You should be able to easily move it, okay? If that makes you nervous, you can leave it on the cake board, but just move it onto a new cake board after you pour. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so now we got a curvy cake on a curvy board. So your extra ganache, you're going to put it in a mixing bowl with a whip attachment. And then we're going to whip this up until it looks like frosting. So you kind of make the ice on it. And then I use this to get my bowl cold, which then gets my product cold. But ganache needs to be chilled for it to start to whip up. So it should almost look like it's light and airy, okay? We turn this off. And then I got some darker ganache on the bottom. With a cake with the cord glaze, which this is, you generally will not put a top border on. You would only put a bottom border on, okay? So a border on a cake, I want you to make shells. So I want you to take only half of your whipped ganache first. Make sure you press the product down, twist the back side, hold the majority of the product in the palm of your hand, okay? I've been seeing a lot of you guys, you like to hold it back here and do this, all right? That's not the proper way. You twist it, hold the product in the palm of your hand. I want you to get a piece of parchment, and I want you to practice making shells. I want you to just do, it should be a shell, one at a time, okay? I have you putting only half of the product in the bag, because this will get warm, and you're not going to use it. So I'm keeping part of it cold in the bowl, so that when you're done practicing, you have fresh to use. You're going to do shells, which is letting it roll up. You're basically piping it at about a 45 degree. You're piping the product out, and then it'll kind of roll. And then once it rolls, you're gonna stop squeezing and you're gonna pull back, so it kind of looks like the shell shape right here. Okay, I'm gonna have to come around and show you. I will be getting close. I'll have my shield on. If you guys don't put your shield on, just let me know. Okay. Right. So I want to see on parchment, so you can easily clean that up. And then you're gonna go around the bottom with your shells. Okay. Now a cake needs to be portioned out. Okay, especially a cake from a restaurant, so that when the person that's going to serve the cake knows what size they should be. Okay. This cake we're going to do in a 12, so think of a clock. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to do rosettes, which go like just a little round. Okay. So just around, and then you're done. All right. So that's a rosette. So what you're going to do is you're going to do 12 o'clock. Then the same distance from the side to the rosette, you're going to go down here to 6 o'clock. I'm going to leave this all in the monitor like this so you guys can look at it. When you're ready to pipe, let me know, and I will come and help you, and Chef Bierman will help you. Like, how quick was she decorating?